She crawled under the biker's table, trembling, begging him not to tell. Seconds later, her billionaire stepfather stormed in with bodyguards demanding her back. What the bikers found in her backpack would bring an empire to its knees. And the little girl who came for shelter became the one thing they'd protect at any cost. The coffee in my mug had gone cold 15 minutes ago, but I didn't care. After 23 years leading the Steelhawks, I'd learned that the best conversations happen over lukewarm coffee at roadside diners at 11 p.m. Bull was telling some story about his nephew's graduation when the bell above Mama Rosie's door didn't jingle. It slammed. That's when I knew. I didn't look up right away. You don't survive 2 decades in the life by being jumpy. But I listened. The sound that came next wasn't the shuffle of a tired trucker or the laughter of late-night travelers. It was the desperate patter of small feet moving fast, too fast, like prey running from a predator. Then she was under our table. I felt her before I saw her, tiny fingers gripping my boot, a whisper so quiet it barely qualified as sound. "Please don't tell him I'm here." Bull stopped mid-sentence. Mac's burger hung frozen halfway to his mouth. Across the table, Snake and Tiny went still as statues. We'd all heard that tone before. Pure terror. I lowered my hand slowly beneath the table. A small palm pressed against mine, ice cold and shaking like a leaf in a hurricane. "Easy now," I murmured, keeping my voice low and steady. "Nobody's telling anybody nothing." That's when the headlights swept across the diner windows. A black Mercedes S-Class pulled into the parking lot with the aggressive precision of someone used to owning every space they entered. The kind of car that cost more than most people made in 3 years. The engine cut off. 3 seconds of silence. Then the door opened. The man who walked in didn't just enter rooms, he claimed them. Tall, mid-50s with silver at the temples and a suit that probably cost $5,000. 2 guys flanked him, earpieces visible, hands resting near their waistbands in that way that screamed private security. The diner went quiet. Even Mama Rosie behind the counter stopped wiping down glasses. "Good evening." His voice was smooth, the kind of smooth that came from boardrooms and charity galas. His eyes swept the room like searchlights. "I'm looking for my daughter, 12 years old, dark brown hair, probably frightened. She ran away from our car about 2 miles back." Under the table, those tiny fingers squeezed tighter. Mama Rosie crossed her arms. "Haven't seen any kids tonight, mister." "Stepdaughter," the man corrected, pulling out his phone. He showed a photo, a young girl with big eyes and a nervous smile. "Sophie. She's confused. Not well. I need to get her home safely." Something about the way he said "not well" made my skin crawl. Too rehearsed, too controlled. His gaze landed on our table. "You gentlemen see a little girl come through here?" I took a slow sip of my cold coffee, meeting his calculating eyes without flinching. Around me, my crew radiated the kind of calm that comes right before storms. "Been here an hour," I said evenly. "Seen a lot of coffee, no kids." One of the bodyguards whispered something in his ear. The man's jaw tightened and I saw it, a flash of something ugly beneath the polish. "She's sick," he said, and now there was an edge in his voice. "She has a medical condition. Without her medication, she could have a serious episode." "Could what?" Bull interrupted, his voice a low rumble. "Drop dead right in front of us?" The man's eyes flashed. "I don't appreciate your tone. And I don't appreciate suits rolling up on my dinner," Bull shot back. I raised a hand, silencing my brother. "If we see a lost kid, we'll call it in. That good enough?" The air between us could have caught fire. The man studied me for a long moment, running calculations. Whatever odds he was computing, he must not have liked them. "I'll be at the Grand Regency Hotel," he finally said, pulling a business card from his pocket and placing it on our table. "Castellano Development Group. When you find her, there's a $10,000 reward." He turned to leave, then paused. "And gentlemen, interfering with a parent's rights is a serious crime. I'd hate for this to become complicated." The threat hung in the air like smoke. When the Mercedes disappeared down the highway, the diner released its held breath. I pushed my chair back carefully and looked down. Two brown eyes stared up at me from the shadows, wide, terrified, but also sharp. Too sharp for a 12-year-old. "He's gone," I said quietly. She didn't move. "Come on out, little one. You're safe now." Slowly, like a fox leaving its den, she crawled out. Her jeans were torn at the knees, her purple backpack covered in dust. She couldn't have weighed more than 80 pounds. But when she stood, she didn't cry. She just looked at me with unsettling calm and said, "Thank you for lying." Then she pushed up her sleeve. The bruises were dark purple, methodical, placed exactly where long sleeves would hide them. Finger-shaped marks on her wrist, a handprint on her upper arm. Bull stood so fast his chair scraped the floor, and Sophie whispered the words that would change everything. "My name is Sophie, and my stepfather is going to kill me, just like he killed my mother." Mama Rosie brought hot chocolate without being asked. She set it in front of Sophie with the kind of gentleness that only comes from women who've seen too many broken things. Sophie wrapped both hands around the mug, but didn't drink. She just stared into it like the answers to the universe were floating in the marshmallows. "How long you been running?" I asked, sliding into the booth across from her. "Since the funeral," she said, her voice hollow. 4 days ago, Mommy's funeral." Bull pulled a chair closer. Mac set down his burger. We formed an unconscious protective circle around her, and I realized we'd already made our choice. This girl wasn't going back to that man. Not tonight. Not ever. "I'm sorry about your mom," I said, and meant it. Sophie nodded, still not looking up. "She got sick really fast. The doctor said it was a heart attack. She was only 36. Her hands trembled around the mug. But Richard smiled at the funeral. I saw him. When everyone was crying when they were lowering her casket, he smiled. "Richard Castellano," Max said slowly, like he was testing the name in his mouth. "Castellano Development Group." "You know him?" Snake asked. Mac's face had gone pale. "I know what he does. He buys up neighborhoods, bribes city councils to condemn buildings, then bulldozes everything for luxury condos." His hands curled into fists. "My family's neighborhood, East Phoenix, where I grew up, Castellano bought it 6 years ago. Gave us 24 hours to clear out. My grandmother's house, the one my grandfather built with his own hands, was demolished while she watched from across the street." The air in the diner changed. This wasn't just about protecting a scared kid anymore. This was personal. "Mommy worked for him," Sophie said quietly. "She was his accountant. That's how they met. After Daddy died, she thought Richard was kind." A tear rolled down her cheek. "But he wasn't kind. He was just good at pretending." She reached into her purple backpack, worn at the edges, covered in keychains shaped like stars and moons, and pulled out a spiral notebook. The cover was decorated with stickers of flowers and butterflies, the kind a mother and daughter might have put on together during a lazy Sunday afternoon. But when she opened it, I understood why she'd been running. Every page was covered in neat handwriting. Dates, names, dollar amounts, addresses, all written in purple ink, the letters slightly shaky like someone had been writing in secret, in fear. "Mommy started keeping this about 6 months ago," Sophie said, her finger tracing the words. "She said Richard was doing bad things, hurting people. She wanted to stop him, but she was scared." She looked up at me with those 2 old eyes. She was right to be scared. I took the notebook carefully, like it might explode. Mac leaned over my shoulder as I flipped through the pages. March 15th. RC paid council member James Morrison $50,000. Vote scheduled for March 20th to condemn Riverside Apartments. 200 families will be displaced. April 3rd, Safety Inspector Rodriguez filed complaint about the Central Ave project. RC called him. Inspector withdrew complaint next day. RC made $15,000 deposit to Rodriguez's account. April 28th, Mrs. Chen refused to sell her property. RC sent contractors to her home. She sold 3 days later. Hospital records show broken wrist. Page after page, Month after month, a paper trail of corruption, bribery, intimidation, and violence. Jesus, Bull breathed. There's more, Sophie whispered. She pulled a small stuffed rabbit from her backpack, worn pink fabric, one button eye hanging loose. This is Mr. Hopscotch. Mommy gave him to me when I was little. She squeezed the rabbit, and I heard something inside crinkle. She sewed something into the lining, a USB drive. She said it has videos and recordings. She said if anything happened to her, I should give it to someone brave. She looked at each of us, 5 rough men with leather vests, scars, and bikes that roared like thunder. You stood up to Richard when everyone else was too scared. You didn't take his money, you didn't believe his lies. Her voice cracked. You're brave, right? I felt something tighten in my chest. This 12-year-old girl who'd just buried her mother and been hunted across the desert was asking us to fight a billionaire. A man with lawyers, bodyguards, politicians in his pocket. It was insane, reckless, dangerous. Max spoke first. My grandmother died 6 months after they took her home. Broken heart, the doctor said. His voice was steel. I'm in. Same, Bull rumbled. Nobody puts hands on a kid. Nobody. Snake and Tiny nodded. I looked at Sophie, at the hope and terror warring in her eyes, and made a promise I intended to keep. Yeah, kiddo, we're brave. And we're going to finish what your mommy started. Outside, thunder rolled across the desert. But inside Mama Rosie's diner, we'd just declared war on an empire, and we didn't know it yet. But Richard Castellano was already planning his next move. We moved Sophie to the back office of Mama Rosie's diner. It wasn't much, a worn couch, a desk covered in receipts, and a lock on the door. But it was safe. Or so we thought. She fell asleep within minutes, exhausted from days of running. Mr. Hopscotch clutched to her chest like a lifeline. Mama Rosie covered her with a handmade quilt, the kind that smelled like lavender and safety. She stays as long as she needs, Mama Rosie said firmly. That man comes back, he'll have to go through me first. I didn't tell her that if Castellano came back, going through her was exactly what he'd do. Men like him didn't respect boundaries. They bought them, bulldozed them, or buried them. We spent the night taking shifts. Bull at the front door, Mac monitoring police scanners, Snake doing research on Castellano Development Group, uncovering a trail of demolished neighborhoods and displaced families that stretched back 15 years. Dawn came cold and gray. Sophie woke around 7, quietly helping Mama Rosie prep for the breakfast rush. She moved like she was trying to make herself useful, like she was afraid we'd change our minds about protecting her if she wasn't earning her keep. It broke something in me to watch. That's when the Mercedes returned, but this time Castellano didn't come alone. He brought 3 men in expensive suits, lawyers by the look of them, and a woman with a briefcase and the dead eyes of someone who'd sold their soul for a paycheck. The bell above the door chimed. Every head in the diner turned. Castellano looked different in the morning light, more polished, more dangerous. He'd changed his approach, switching from intimidation to persuasion. Good morning, gentlemen. He smiled like we were old friends. I believe we got off on the wrong foot last night. I was worried, frightened for my daughter. Perhaps I came across too aggressive. Bull snorted into his coffee. Castellano ignored him, addressing me directly. Mr. Kane, yes, I know your name. I make it my business to know who I'm dealing with. You run an honest operation, community-focused. I respect that. Get to the point, I said. The point is this. I'm a father worried sick about his daughter. Sophie is confused, grieving her mother, not thinking clearly. He gestured to one of the lawyers who opened a briefcase. I'm prepared to offer $10,000 as a reward for her safe return. No questions asked, no complications. You bring her to me, everyone walks away happy. $10,000. That was 3 months of clubhouse rent, new parts for half our bikes, money the Steelhawks could actually use. I watched his face, watched the way his smile didn't reach his eyes, watched how his fingers tapped against his thigh, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, like he was counting down to something. She's not lost, I said. She's hiding. There's a difference. From what? Castellano's voice took on a theatrical confusion. I've given her everything. Private schools, clothes, a beautiful home. Her mother's death has been traumatic, of course, but Sophie has episodes, delusions. She says things that aren't true, believes things that never happened. Like what? Mac asked coldly. Like that I somehow harmed her mother, that I'm dangerous. He shook his head sadly. Her therapist can confirm. Sophie has been having these paranoid episodes for months. She needs help, professional help. Not. He gestured around the diner, hiding in truck stops with strangers. The woman with the briefcase pulled out documents, medical records, psychiatric evaluations. All perfectly forged, I was sure, but convincing enough to fool a judge. That's when Sophie emerged from the back. She froze when she saw Castellano. Her face went white. Her hand started shaking. Sophie, sweetheart, Castellano said, his voice dripping with false warmth. Come here. Let's go home. Everything will be okay. No. The word came out small, terrified. Sophie. I said no. Her voice cracked. She backed toward our table, and in her panic she stumbled. Bull caught her, and as he steadied her, her sleeves rode up. That's when we all saw them clearly. The bruises weren't just on her wrist. They covered her forearms like a map of violence. Fingerprints, grab marks, some fresh, some fading to yellow-green. On her upper arm, a perfect handprint, large, adult-sized, deliberately placed. The diner went silent. Bull's hands trembled as he gently pulled Sophie's sleeves back down. His face had gone dark, dangerous. Max stood up slowly. Snake's chair scraped against the floor. I walked toward Castellano, stopped 3 feet away, close enough to see the calculation in his eyes, the cold assessment of whether violence was his best option right now. Your offer? I said quietly. You can shove it. Excuse me? We declare war instead. Leave. Castellano's mask slipped, just for a second. The concerned father vanished, replaced by something reptilian, something that enjoyed causing pain. You just made the worst mistake of your lives, he whispered, so softly only I could hear, then louder for his lawyers. Remember, you were all witnesses. These men are holding my daughter against her will. That's kidnapping. Federal crime. He turned and walked out, his entourage following. Through the window, I watched him pull out his phone. Mama Rosie locked the door behind them. Ryder, what did we just do? I looked at Sophie, at Bull's protective hand on her shoulder, at my brothers who'd just thrown away $10,000 and possibly their freedom for a girl they'd known less than 12 hours. The right thing, I said. Now we figure out how to survive it. We had 48 hours before Castellano made his next move, maybe less. Men like him didn't make threats. They made plans. And we needed to be ready. Mac, you still got contacts in construction? I asked as we gathered in the clubhouse. Yeah, my cousin runs a crew out of Tempe. Why? Because we need eyes inside Castellano's operations. Real evidence. Not just a notebook and a USB drive we haven't even cracked yet. I looked at Snake. You worked commercial construction for what, 8 years? 10? Snake corrected. I can swing a hammer and keep my mouth shut. Good. Castellano's got a development project going up on the east side, the Rivera complex. Get hired on. Document everything. Safety violations, labor issues, anything we can use. While they geared up, I sat down with Sophie and the stuffed rabbit. Mr. Hopscotch looked innocent enough, but I could feel the hard rectangle inside the fabric. We need to open him up, I said gently, to get the drive. Sophie's eyes filled with tears. Mommy sewed it in. It was the last thing she did before. Mama Rosie sat down beside her, taking her hand. Honey, we'll sew him back up good as new. Better even, I promise. Sophie nodded, clutching the rabbit one last time before handing it over. The USB drive was wrapped in plastic, protected from moisture and damage. Smart woman, Sophie's mother. She'd known this evidence might be her daughter's only insurance policy. It took me 2 hours to break through the encryption, not because it was particularly sophisticated, but because Sophie's mother had used a password only her daughter would know. Sophie Star 2012, Sophie's nickname and birth year. When the files opened, I understood why Helen had been so afraid. Video files, dozens of them, time-stamped, dated, organized by location. I clicked on the first one. Helen appeared on screen, sitting in what looked like a home office. Her hands trembled slightly as she adjusted the camera. "My name is Helen Park Castellano, and I'm making this recording because I believe my husband is going to kill me." My blood went cold. For 6 months, I've been documenting Richard's business practices. What started as concerns about accounting irregularities became so much worse. She glanced toward a closed door like she was afraid he might walk in. He bribes city officials, threatens families, falsifies safety inspections, and when people refuse to cooperate, he makes them disappear, not literally but legally. Bankruptcies, foreclosures, sudden accidents that force sales. The video cut to footage of a demolition. A small house, somebody's home, being torn apart by machinery while an elderly woman sobbed on the sidewalk. "This is Mrs. Chen," Helen's voice narrated. "She refused to sell. Richard sent men to her home. She was hospitalized with a broken wrist the next day. She sold for 30% of market value 3 days later. More videos, audio recordings of Castellano on the phone. I don't care what it takes. Get them out. Condemned building gas leak, I don't care. Make it happen." Spreadsheets showing payments to inspectors, councilmen, permit officers. A whole system of corruption built over 15 years. And then, the final video. Helen again, but this time she looked sick, pale, sweating. "It's April 28th. I confronted Richard tonight about everything I found. He was calm, too calm. He said," her voice broke. "He said accidents happen to people who don't know when to stop asking questions. I think he poisoned me. I feel strange, dizzy. My heart." The video cut off. The medical examiner's report, attached as a PDF, listed cause of death as acute myocardial infarction. Heart attack, natural causes. But Helen had been 36 years old, no history of heart disease, and the symptoms she'd described, the ones caught on camera, matched certain poisons that metabolized quickly, leaving minimal trace evidence. I sat back, the weight of it crushing me. Bull appeared in the doorway. "Find anything?" "Everything," I said quietly. "He killed her, and we can prove it." 3 hours later, Mac called from the construction site. "Boss, you need to hear this." His voice was tight with rage. In the background, I could hear machinery, shouting, the chaos of a worksite. Then a supervisor's voice, clear and loud. "I don't care if the rebar spacing is off. Mr. Castellano wants this building up in 6 weeks. We cut corners or we cut workers. Your choice." Another voice. "But the inspection..." "Already handled. Inspector Martinez sees what we pay him to see. Now get back to work." Mac came back on the line. "Ryder, this building is going to collapse. Maybe not today, maybe not next year, but eventually. And when it does, people will die. Document everything," I said. "Photos, videos, recordings. We're building a case that even his lawyers can't bury." When I hung up, Sophie was standing in the doorway, Mr. Hopscotch freshly sewn and back in her arms. "Did you find Mommy's videos?" she asked quietly. "Yeah, kiddo, we did." "Is it enough to stop him?" I looked at this brave girl who'd lost everything but still had the courage to fight. "It's enough to start a war, and this time we're going to win." The fire started at 2:17 a.m. I know because I was awake reviewing Helen's videos for the 3rd time, trying to find anything we might have missed. The secondary clubhouse, an old warehouse we used for storage and emergency accommodations, was quiet except for the hum of the ancient refrigerator and Bull's snoring from the back room where he was bunking with Sophie. The smoke alarm didn't give us much warning. Maybe 30 seconds. One moment I was reading a text from Snake about falsified concrete inspections. The next, the alarm was screaming and smoke was pouring under the back door like a living thing, thick and black and hungry. Fire, I shouted, already moving. Bull, get Sophie, now! I heard him before I saw him, his heavy footsteps, then Sophie's scream. The smoke was spreading fast, too fast. This wasn't an electrical fire or an accident. This was accelerant. This was intentional. Bull emerged through the smoke carrying Sophie like she weighed nothing. Her arms wrapped around his neck, her face buried in his shoulder. Mercy, our clubhouse dog, ran at his heels, barking frantically. Back door's blocked, Bull roared. Flames everywhere. Front exit, go, go, go! We ran through the main room. Heat pressed against us like a physical force. I grabbed Sophie's purple backpack, the one with the notebook and Mr. Hopscotch. As we passed, behind us, something exploded. Probably the propane tanks we kept for the grill. The front door was locked from the outside. My blood turned to ice. They trapped us, Bull said, his voice deadly calm even as flames crept up the walls. They locked us in. Sophie whimpered. Mercy barked frantically at a side window. The window, I pointed. Bull, break it. He didn't hesitate. Still holding Sophie with one arm, he used his elbow to shatter the glass. Smoke billowed out. Fresh air rushed in, feeding the fire, making it roar like a beast. Sophie first. Bull lifted her through the window. She landed in the gravel parking lot, stumbling but upright. Mercy, jump. The dog didn't need telling twice. She leaped through, landing beside Sophie. Bull went next, his large frame barely fitting through. Glass cut his arms, his shoulders, but he didn't slow down. I took one last look at the clubhouse. Flames consumed everything, our history, our sanctuary, our home. On the far wall, I saw something that made my stomach drop. Words. Burned into the wood with accelerant in letters 3 feet tall. Return what's mine. Then I was climbing through the window, hitting the ground hard as the roof began to collapse behind me. We stood in the parking lot, watching 15 years of brotherhood burn. Sophie pressed against Bull's side, her small hand gripping his vest. Mercy leaned against my leg, whimpering. He tried to kill us, Sophie whispered. He really tried to kill us. Yeah, kiddo, I said quietly. He did. Sirens wailed in the distance. Fire trucks, police, probably ambulances. Bull had cuts on his arms that needed stitching. We were all covered in soot, coughing smoke from our lungs. But we were alive. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. Against my better judgment, I answered. Ryder Kane. Castellano's voice was smooth as silk. I hope everyone got out safely. Old buildings like that, wiring can be so unpredictable. You son of a... I tried to be reasonable, offered you money, offered you a clean exit. But you chose to make this difficult. His voice hardened. That little girl has something that belongs to me. Return it, or next time, I'll make sure there's no time to escape. The line went dead. Sophie looked up at me with those 2 old eyes. We can't go back to Mama Rosie's. He'll burn that too. She was right. Castellano knew where we gathered, where we felt safe. Nowhere was safe anymore. Bull's phone rang, then Max, then Snake's. The Brotherhood calling in, having seen the smoke, the flames, the news already spreading through our network. Within an hour, we had options. A truck driver's ranch outside Sedona, a retired biker's cabin near Flagstaff, an old church basement in Prescott where the pastor asked no questions. Sophie learned a new skill that night, how to pack a bag in 30 seconds, how to sleep with your shoes on, how to never ever assume you're safe. As fire investigators picked through the ashes at dawn, one of them called me over. Mr. Kane, you need to see this. Where the message had been burned into the wall, they'd found something else. A timer, commercial-grade accelerant, and a cell phone trigger. This was remotely detonated, the investigator said grimly. Someone was watching, waiting until you were all inside, then activated it from a distance. Bull's face went dark. He's hunting us like animals. No, I corrected, looking at Sophie, who stood brave and small in clothes borrowed from Mama Rosie's Lost and Found. He's hunting her. We're just in the way. Sophie squared her small shoulders. Then we stop running and start fighting back. For a 12-year-old girl who just nearly burned alive, she had more courage than most soldiers I'd known. Yeah, I agreed. We fight back. But first, we disappear. We moved Sophie between 3 locations in 4 days. The truck driver's ranch, a sympathetic biker's cabin where his wife made chocolate chip pancakes and didn't ask questions. Finally, a church basement where Father Miguel had been helping runaways and abuse victims for 20 years. God's house protects all his children, he said simply, showing us the cot, the locked door, the emergency exit that led to the cemetery. Stay as long as you need. But Sophie couldn't sleep. I found her at 3 a.m., sitting on the basement floor with Mr. Hopscotch in her lap, tracing the stitches where Mama Rosie had sewn him back up. It's still in there, isn't it? I asked, sitting down beside her on the cold concrete. She nodded. Mommy's evidence. The thing Richard wants so badly he'll burn buildings and kill people to get it back. We need it, Sophie. If we're going to stop him, really stop him, we need to know everything your mom knew. Her small fingers clutched the rabbit tighter. If I give it to you, if you see what's on there, you'll understand why he killed her, and you'll understand why he'll never stop hunting me. I know. She looked at me with those ancient eyes. Promise me something, Ryder. Promise that when this is over, people will know what Mommy did, that she was brave, that she tried to save people. I promise, kiddo. She carefully picked at the stitches until the USB drive emerged, wrapped in plastic, protected like the treasure it was. She placed it in my hand like she was handing over her mother's soul. The password, she whispered. It's Sophie Star 2012. That's what Daddy used to call me. Before he died. Before Richard. It took 30 minutes to decrypt everything. 30 minutes that felt like hours. Bull stood behind me watching the screen. Mac had driven through the night to be there. Snake arrived with coffee that no one touched. We all needed to see this together. The files organized themselves. Financial records, audio files, video evidence, final recording. I clicked on final recording first. Helen's face appeared on screen. The timestamp read April 28th, 11:47 p.m. 10 hours before she was found dead. My name is Helen Park Castellano. Her voice trembled. If you're watching this, it means I was right. It means Richard killed me. Sophie made a small sound, half gasp, half sob. Bull's hand settled on her shoulder. Tonight I confronted him about everything I've found. The bribes, the threats, the families he's destroyed. I told him I was going to the FBI. Helen's hands shook as she wiped tears. He didn't yell, didn't threaten. He just smiled and said, Helen, you should be more careful. Stress is terrible for the heart, especially for someone with your family history. She paused, her breathing labored. I don't have a family history of heart problems. But Richard doesn't know I've been recording our conversations for months. She clicked something off screen. Another audio file began playing. Richard's voice, cold and clinical. The digitalis needs to be untraceable. I'm not paying you to leave evidence. Make it look like cardiac arrest. Natural causes. She's been under stress, grieving. Anyone would believe it. Another voice. What about the daughter? Sophie? Richard laughed. She's 12. No one listens to children. And if she becomes a problem, well, accidents happen. On the video, Helen was crying silently. I feel strange. My heart is racing. I think he already did it. Tonight, in my drink. She gasped, pressing a hand to her chest. Sophie, baby, if you're seeing this, I'm so sorry I couldn't protect you. But I'm giving you the tools to protect yourself. Take this to someone brave, someone who won't be bought, and bring your stepfather down. The video ended. The basement was silent except for Sophie's quiet sobbing. Bull had tears running down his scarred face. Mac's hands were clenched so tight his knuckles had gone white. He poisoned her, Snake said, his voice hollow, and watched her die. and smiled at her funeral. I clicked through the other files. Bank records showing payments to a consultant named Dr. Marcus Webb, 3 transfers of $50,000 in the weeks before Helen's death. A background check Mac ran showed Webb had been stripped of his medical license for illegal prescription practices. Audio recordings of Castellano ordering intimidation, arson, assault. Video footage of his men threatening families, bribing officials, falsifying documents. And a spreadsheet, liabilities, a list of people who knew too much or refused to cooperate. 23 names, 17 had experienced accidents, health crises, or financial ruin within months of being added to the list. Helen's name was number 18. Sophie was number 24. Added the day after her mother's funeral. Sophie stood up, wiping her eyes, her jaw set with determination that shouldn't exist in someone so young. "Does this prove he killed Mommy?" she asked. "Yeah, kiddo," I said quietly. "It proves everything." "Then what are we waiting for? Let's destroy him." I looked at my brothers. We'd gone from protecting a runaway to holding evidence that could bring down a criminal empire. Evidence that made us targets. Evidence that meant Castellano would never stop until we were dead or silent. Bull spoke first. "For Helen. For every family he crushed." "For Sophie," Mac added. Snake and I nodded. "Then we take this to the FBI, I said. "But we do it smart. Copies everywhere. Insurance. Because the moment Castellano knows we have this, he'll come at us with everything." Sophie picked up Mr. Hopscotch, now emptied of his secret burden. "Mommy used to say the truth always wins. It just takes brave people to tell it." Outside, dawn was breaking, and somewhere in his penthouse office, Richard Castellano had no idea his empire was about to crumble. We should have known they'd find us. Should have known that Father Miguel's church, for all its good intentions, was still connected to the grid, still had an address, still existed in the world where men like Richard Castellano had resources we couldn't imagine. The warning came from an unlikely source, a kid on a skateboard. He rolled up to Mac, who was on watch outside the church at dawn, and said, "Mister, there's black SUVs circling the block. 3 of them. Men with earpieces. They're looking for something." Mac didn't wait. He burst into the basement, his face pale. "They're here. We've got maybe 5 minutes." Sophie was awake instantly, grabbing her backpack with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd done this too many times. "Mister," Hopscotch went in first, then the notebook, then the spare clothes Mama Rosie had packed. "How many?" I asked, already moving toward the emergency exit. 3 SUVs I saw. Could be more. Mac checked his phone. "Bull and Snake are bringing the bikes around back, cemetery exit." Father Miguel appeared, pressing keys into my hand. "Van in the parking lot, blue Dodge. Take it if you need to." "Father, go with God, my son, and protect that child." We moved through the emergency exit into the cemetery, the morning mist still clinging to the gravestones like ghosts. Our motorcycles waited, engines already rumbling. Bull had them warmed up and ready. That's when the first SUV pulled into the cemetery entrance, blocking our escape route. The doors opened. 6 men emerged, tactical gear, earpieces, moving with military precision. Leading them was a man I recognized from the background checks Mac had run. Viktor Sokolov, former Spetsnaz, current head of Castellano's private security. "Mr. Kane." Victor's accent was thick, his smile colder than the morning air. "Mr. Castellano simply wants his daughter returned safely. No one needs to get hurt." "She's not his daughter," Bull growled. "Semantics." Victor gestured, and his men fanned out, hands moving toward concealed weapons. "The girl comes with us. You ride away. Everyone lives." Sophie pressed against my back, her small hands gripping my vest. I could feel her trembling, but when she spoke, her voice was steady. "I'm not going back to him." "Sophie, sweetheart." Victor's voice turned mockingly gentle. "Your stepfather misses you. He just wants you home where you're safe." "Safe?" Sophie's voice rose. "He murdered my mother. He burned a building with us inside. He's trying to kill me." Victor's smile never wavered. "See? Delusions. Trauma. The poor child needs help. Mr. Castellano has the best psychiatrist waiting. I felt rage flood through me. They were going to take her, lock her away, drug her into silence. And if that didn't work, she'd have an accident, just like her mother. Bull, I said quietly. When I say go, you take Sophie and run. Cemetery has a back gate near the mausoleum. Ryder? That's an order. Victor's men moved closer. Hands touched holsters. The situation was seconds from turning lethal. Then Snake's voice crackled over our radio. North side now, move! Chaos erupted. Snake roared in on his bike from the north entrance, creating a distraction. Mac threw something, a smoke grenade he'd kept from his army days, and suddenly the cemetery filled with thick gray smoke. Go! I shouted. Bull gunned his engine, Sophie clinging to him as he shot through a gap between headstones. I followed, Mac and Snake flanking us. Behind us, Victor was shouting orders. Engine starting, the hunt beginning. We burst through the back cemetery gate onto a service road. But the SUVs were fast, and they knew these streets. Highway 89, I yelled into my radio. Head for the canyon roads. They can't follow us there. We hit the highway doing 80, weaving through early morning traffic. The SUVs stayed with us, aggressive, relentless. One pulled alongside Mac, trying to force him off the road. He swerved, nearly lost control, recovered at the last second. Then I heard it, the crack of a gunshot. Sparks flew off the pavement near my front tire. They're shooting! Snake's voice was tight with fury. They're actually shooting at us! Sophie's arms tightened around my waist. I felt her face press against my back, trying to make herself smaller. Hold on, kiddo. I twisted the throttle, my bike surging forward. We took the turnoff to the canyon roads, narrow, winding paths carved into red rock that locals knew and tourists feared. The SUVs followed, but they were too big, too heavy for these turns. Bull took a hairpin curve at 60, leaning so far his boot scraped pavement. I followed, Sophie's weight shifting with mine, trusting me completely. Behind us, one SUV took the curve too fast. It clipped the guardrail, spun, crashed into the canyon wall. Smoke poured from its hood, but the other two kept coming. For 30 miles we rode like demons through canyons and switchbacks, past sheer drops and narrow passages. My arms screamed, my lungs burned, but we couldn't stop, wouldn't stop. Finally, we lost them in a maze of dirt roads only locals knew, emerging on a highway 3 counties over. We pulled into an abandoned gas station, hidden from the road, and finally stopped. Sophie slid off the bike, stumbled, fell to her knees, and vomited from fear and adrenaline. Bull held her hair back while she shook. When she could speak, she looked up at me with tear-stained cheeks and asked the question that broke my heart. How many more times do we have to run? I had no answer, because I knew the truth. As long as Castellano was free, we'd never stop running. The call went out on the Brotherhood network at 2 p.m. By 6 p.m., we had company. Bull's phone rang first, then Mac's, then mine. Motorcycle clubs from across 3 states, chapters we'd ridden with, clubs we'd helped, brothers we'd shared roads and beers and stories with, all calling with the same message. We heard what happened. What do you need? The ironclad riders out of Tucson sent 5 bikes. The Desert Phantoms from Nevada sent 8. The Crimson Saints, a club we'd partnered with for charity runs, sent their entire chapter, 15 riders, all ready to put their lives on the line for a girl they'd never met. By nightfall, the abandoned airfield where we'd taken refuge looked like a biker rally. 50 motorcycles, 50 men and women in leather and patches, forming a protective wall around one 12-year-old girl. Sophie stood in the center of it all, eyes wide with wonder and disbelief. Why? She whispered to me. Why are all these people helping me? Because word travels fast in our world, I said. And when a kid's in trouble, when someone's being hunted by a monster with money and power, we don't look away. We show up. A massive biker named Hammer from the ironclad riders knelt down to Sophie's level. His arms were covered in tattoos, his beard reached his chest, and kids usually ran from him at gas stations. Little sister, he said gently, my daughter's about your age. If some bastard hurt her, I'd want somebody to stand up. So here we are. Your family now. Sophie's eyes filled with tears. Thank you. Don't thank us yet, Hammer grinned. Wait till you taste my wife's cooking. She's bringing chili tomorrow. Best in Arizona. The mood shifted from desperate survival to organized resistance. We had numbers now, resources, a rotating guard schedule, safe houses scattered across 4 states. Castellano's men couldn't track 50 bikes moving in different directions, but it was Mac's girlfriend Jenna, a social media manager for a nonprofit, who suggested the real weapon. You're fighting this wrong, she said, laptop open on a makeshift table. You're running, hiding, defending. But Castellano's greatest strength is his reputation. He's the philanthropist, the job creator, the respectable businessman. What if we take that away? How? Snake asked. We tell Sophie's story, not just to the FBI, to everyone. Within an hour, she'd created a hashtag. Justice for Sophie. She posted a photo, Sophie's school picture, smiling, innocent, next to a blurred image of her bruises. The caption read, "This is Sophie, 12 years old. Her stepfather murdered her mother and is now hunting her to silence what she knows about his crimes. Her mother documented everything before she died. The truth needs to be heard. Share if you believe children deserve protection." It went viral in 6 hours, 10,000 shares, then 50,000, then 500,000. News outlets picked it up. Local reporters started asking questions. Castellano Development Group's social media was flooded with angry comments. People wanted answers. People wanted justice. But Castellano fought back the only way he knew how, with lies. 2 days later, he appeared on Channel 12 News, sitting in his pristine office, looking like a grieving father. The chyron read, "Local developer speaks out about missing stepdaughter. We watched from a motel room in Flagstaff, Sophie sitting between Bull and me. My stepdaughter Sophie has been through tremendous trauma," Castellano said, his voice breaking perfectly on cue. Losing her mother so suddenly, it's broken her. She's having episodes saying things that aren't true, running from the people trying to help her. The reporter leaned forward sympathetically. "And the allegations that you were involved in your wife's death?" "Absolutely false. Devastating, honestly." He wiped his eyes. No actual tears, I noticed. Helen had a heart condition, we all knew it. Her death was tragic but natural. Sophie, in her grief, has created this fantasy that someone is to blame, that I'm somehow the villain. He looked directly into the camera. "Sophie, sweetheart, if you're watching, please come home. I love you. I just want you safe. These people who've taken you, they're criminals. They're using you. Please, let the police bring you home where you belong." The performance was flawless, concerned, loving, believable. Sophie stared at the screen, her small hands clenched into fists. Tears streamed down her face, but they weren't tears of fear. They were tears of rage. "He's lying," she said, her voice shaking. "Why does everyone believe him? Why do they always believe people like him?" "Because he's got money and lawyers and a good suit," Mac said bitterly. "And we've got, what? A USB drive and a notebook?" "No," Jenna said firmly, typing furiously. "We have something better. We have the truth, and we have numbers." She turned her laptop around. The Justice for Sophie hashtag had exploded. 2 million tweets, news segments, think pieces, celebrities weighing in. But more importantly, people were digging. Journalists were investigating. Former Castellano employees were coming forward with their own stories of intimidation and corruption. A construction worker posted photos of safety violations. A city councilor admitted taking bribes. Families displaced by Castellano's developments shared their stories. The empire was cracking. "He can smile for cameras all he wants," Jenna said. "But the internet never forgets, and people are listening." Sophie wiped her eyes, something fierce and determined settling over her young face. "Then let's give them more to listen to. I want to tell my story, all of it, on camera, so everyone knows what he did to Mommy." Sophie, I started. No. She stood up, small but unbreakable. I'm tired of hiding. I'm tired of running. Mommy documented everything so the truth would come out. It's time. Bull looked at me. Mac nodded slowly. The Brotherhood had her back. All right, kiddo, I said. We'll do it your way. But we do it smart, we do it safe, and we make sure that when your story goes public, we have the FBI ready to move. Because the moment Sophie spoke publicly, Castellano would know we had all of Helen's evidence, and he'd come at us with everything he had. The FBI agent's name was Sarah Chen, and she didn't waste time with pleasantries. Let me be clear, she said, sitting across from me in a secure room the ironclad riders had arranged. What you're describing, if it's real, is conspiracy, murder, racketeering, bribery of public officials. We're talking decades of federal prison time. It's real, I said, sliding Helen's USB drive across the table. Video confessions, audio recordings, financial records, and a 12-year-old witness who watched her stepfather smile at her mother's funeral. Agent Chen picked up the drive like it might explode. If this evidence is authenticated, we can move fast, but the girl, Sophie, she'll need to be in protective custody. Witness protection, probably. No. Sophie's voice came from the doorway. She walked in flanked by Bull, small but determined. I'll testify. I'll do whatever you need, but I'm not hiding anymore. And these people, she gestured to me, to Bull, to the Brotherhood outside. They stay with me. They're my family now. Agent Chen studied Sophie for a long moment, then she nodded. All right, let's bring this bastard down. The plan came together in 72 hours. Agent Chen's team would coordinate simultaneous raids. Castellano's office, his home, the construction sites, Victor's security company headquarters. But timing was everything. We needed Castellano confident, exposed, surrounded by witnesses. That's when Jenna had her brilliant idea. He's speaking at the Arizona Real Estate Development Conference in 2 days, she said, pulling up the event page. 500 people. Live-streamed. Press coverage. He's receiving the Community Builder of the Year award. Mac laughed bitterly. Community Builder, the irony. It's perfect, Agent Chen said. Public venue, no escape route, maximum exposure. We arrest him on stage. But first, Sophie wanted to tell her story. We set up the camera in a safe location, a living room that looked normal, unthreatening. Sophie sat on a couch, Mr. Hopscotch in her lap, and Jenna coached her gently. Just talk to the camera like you're talking to a friend, Jenna said. Tell them what happened. Sophie nodded, took a deep breath, and began. My name is Sophie Park, and I'm 12 years old. My stepfather, Richard Castellano, murdered my mother 3 months ago. He poisoned her because she found out about his crimes, and now he's trying to kill me to keep me quiet. Her voice was steady, clear, heartbreaking. She talked about her mother's notebook, the USB drive, the evidence Helen had gathered. She showed her bruises to the camera, faded now, but still visible. I've been running for weeks, hiding in church basements and motel rooms. These bikers, people say they're dangerous, that they kidnapped me. They saved my life. They're the only ones who believed me when I said my stepfather was going to kill me. She looked directly into the camera, and I saw Helen in her. The same courage, the same refusal to be silenced. My mommy died trying to stop him. I won't let her die for nothing. Richard Castellano needs to face justice for what he's done. And every family he hurt, every person he threatened, every life he destroyed. They deserve justice too. The video ended with Sophie holding up a photo of Helen, smiling, alive, beautiful. This is my mommy. Her name was Helen Park, and she was a hero. The video went live at 9 a.m. on the day of Castellano's award ceremony. By 10 a.m. it had 3 million views. By noon, news helicopters were circling the convention center where Castellano was scheduled to speak. By 2 p.m., when Castellano took the stage to accept his award, Agent Chen and 20 federal agents were positioned throughout the building. We watched from a secure location 3 blocks away, Sophie between Bull and me, her hand gripping mine so tight it hurt. On screen, Castellano stood at the podium, smiling, accepting applause. He started his speech, humble, grateful, talking about community and giving back. Then Agent Chen walked onto the stage. "Richard Castellano, FBI, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, racketeering, bribery of public officials, and fraud." The room erupted. Cameras flashed. People shouted. Castellano's smile vanished, replaced by something ugly and desperate. "This is a mistake. You have the right to remain silent," Agent Chen continued, handcuffing him as agents moved to block all exits. "Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." Simultaneously, raids hit his office, his home, the construction sites. Victor and his security team were arrested trying to flee. Documents were seized, hard drives confiscated, the entire empire exposed and crumbling in real time. Sophie watched it all, tears streaming down her face. "We did it," she whispered. "Mommy, we did it." On screen, as Castellano was being led away, he looked directly at the camera, at Sophie, somehow knowing she was watching. He mouthed 2 words. "Not over." A chill ran down my spine. But then Sophie squeezed my hand and said, "Yes, it is. You lost." And watching federal agents dismantle a criminal empire, I believed her. Outside, 50 motorcycles roared to life, a victory song echoing across the city. 6 months after Richard Castellano's arrest, I stood in the Steelhawks rebuilt clubhouse watching Sophie teach a younger kid how to properly clean a motorcycle chain. "You have to get into all the links," she explained patiently to 8-year-old Marcus, whose father was doing time and whose mother was getting back on her feet. "Miss a spot and it'll wear wrong." Marcus nodded seriously, copying her movements. Sophie had become our unofficial junior member, not in the riding sense, but in spirit. She visited every weekend, staying with her Aunt Linda, who'd gotten custody, but spending most of her time at the clubhouse. The trial had been swift. With Helen's evidence, Sophie's testimony, and dozens of former employees coming forward, Castellano's lawyers couldn't spin their way out. 42 years in federal prison, no parole. Victor got 20. The corrupt officials took plea deals. Castellano Development Group was dissolved, assets seized, properties returned to displaced families when possible. The city reopened investigations into every project Castellano had touched, and Helen Park was recognized posthumously as a whistleblower who'd given her life for justice. "Ryder," Bull called from the garage. "It's ready." Sophie looked up, curious. "What's ready?" "Come see, kiddo." We led her to the garage where the entire brotherhood had gathered. In the center, under a tarp, sat something that had taken us 3 months to build. "Sophie," I said, "you've been through hell. Lost your mom. Nearly lost your life. Spent weeks running and hiding." I pulled the tarp off. "We figured it was time you had wings of your own." Sophie's hands flew to her mouth. It was a motorcycle. Her size, custom built from scratch. The frame was painted deep purple, Helen's favorite color, with silver flames running along the sides. On the gas tank, a decal, a stuffed rabbit with wings, and etched into the chrome handlebars in elegant script, "Braveheart." "Is that?" Sophie's voice broke. "Is that for me?" "All yours," Bull said, his voice gruff with emotion. "Built her ourselves. Every bolt checked 3 times because you deserve something made with love." Sophie ran to the bike, her hands trembling as she touched the paint, the chrome, the seat that was padded extra soft. Then she saw the helmet, custom painted to match, with Sophie Star written inside where only she could see it. "I don't know what to say," she whispered. "Say you'll ride with us," Tiny offered. "When you're ready, when you're old enough. Say you'll remember that you've always got family here." Sophie looked at each of us. Bull, Mac, Snake, Tiny, Mama Rosie, Father Miguel, Jenna, the ironclad riders, the desert phantoms, the crimson saints, all the broken people who'd learned to be dangerous when they needed to be, and gentle when it mattered most. "Can I try it?" she asked, eyes shining. "Already got it registered and street legal." Mac grinned. Well, parking lot legal for now. We spent the afternoon teaching Sophie to ride. Rider beside her, never more than 10 feet away. She wobbled at first, overcorrected, nearly tipped. But she didn't give up. By hour 3, she was doing circles around the lot, her laughter echoing off the buildings. Again, she shouted. I want to go again. Bull wiped his eyes. Damn allergies. Sure, old man, Snake said, but his voice was thick too. That evening, as the sun set over the desert, we gathered at Helen's memorial, a small plaque the city had installed in the park she used to take Sophie to as a child. Sophie stood before it, no longer the terrified girl who'd hidden under my table. She wore a leather vest Mama Rosie had made her with a patch that read, Honorary Steelhawk. Mr. Hopscotch was tucked in her backpack, but she didn't need to hold him anymore. Hi, Mommy, she said quietly. I wanted to tell you, we won. Richard's in prison. All the families he hurt are getting justice, and I'm okay. Better than okay. She touched the plaque. The bikers you told me to find, they became my family. They kept me safe, just like you knew they would. She pulled out a photograph, Helen and Sophie at this very park, both smiling, both alive and happy. I'm going to help other kids now. Kids like me who need someone brave to believe them. We're starting a foundation, the Hopscotch Foundation. Because you taught me that when you're scared, you have to hop forward anyway, even if you don't know where you'll land. The Brotherhood stood behind her, a wall of leather and chrome and unconditional love. As we walked back to the bikes, Sophie slipped her hand into mine. Ryder, thank you. For everything. You saved yourself, kiddo. We just gave you a place to land. No, she said firmly. You gave me a family. That's different. That's everything. 50 motorcycles roared to life as the sun painted the desert gold and purple. Sophie climbed onto her Braveheart bike, training wheels still attached because we weren't stupid, and took her place in the formation. And as we rode into the sunset, I thought about how we'd set out to protect one scared kid and ended up building something bigger, a sanctuary for the broken, a family for the lost, and proof that sometimes the most unlikely heroes wear leather and ride motorcycles. The road belonged to the honest now, and Sophie Park, Braveheart and survivor, was finally free to ride it. The end.